It is Saturday, June 6th, French Open Championship weekend in Paris, France, and welcome to this edition of the Armstrong-Williams Show. We're going to start it out with the medical news. Dr. BRYAN Donohue is joining us. Dr. Donohue, welcome back to the broadcast.
Armstrong, it's always a pleasure.
So, Dr. Donohue, before I even get to what I plan to discuss with you today, talk about what is underreported going on in the medical community. One of the things that we don't talk about is this Ebola virus. And I think it's because we think it's so far away, it's impacting the continent of Africa. But how concerned should we be?
We should be concerned, Armstrong, and we should have learned from our experience with COVID that barriers like oceans no longer count, okay? So it didn't take long for things to arc across the Pacific from Wuhan to Seattle, you'll remember, and it won't take long likewise for this incredibly virulent, destructive, and often lethal virus for which there's no particular treatment now, Armstrong, to likewise arc across the Atlantic and land in America. On the other hand, we're better prepared. So we've thought this thing through. We've dealt with Ebola in the past. Particular destinations for patients have been set up. Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta, Creighton in Nebraska. So we're not coming into this like babes in the woods, but the answer is we should be concerned about this and the future of upcoming pandemics.
You know, our Florida director here, Shay, she had been missing in action, and I asked her what was the medical issue she was dealing with, and she said it was something like the viral flu. And it's sort of, I know so many people who've had her same symptoms, and it just seems like every 4 out of 5 people I talk to, they're suffering with this cough, this virus flu, this mucus, this paralyzes them. Is there something deeper we should be concerned about here? Is this normal?
So Shay is in a large group for whatever comfort that provides Shay, and it is true that there is a very interesting, new, and apparently potent strain of an old adversary called respiratory syncytial virus, or RSV. You'll remember, Armstrong, that about 6 months ago in the deep winter months, there was an outcropping of this, particularly among young patients. We're now seeing it in adults. It's simply a recrudescence of an old enemy. And remember, these biological enemies of ours, they have their own secret intelligence. They mutate, they adapt to the seasons. And so it is true that Shay, like so many other healthy individuals by and large, is afflicted with this respiratory virus. The answer for Shay is be patient. It passes. It can endure for up to 6 weeks. It's more than a nuisance, but less than a calamity.
You know, I want to go back to Carl Bush, because I don't think that's been addressed at all. There's a very dear friend of mine, I'm not going to mention her name. She said to me that Carl Bush made her nervous, and I said, why? She said, you know, I suffer with the same sinuses. I've had the same pneumonia and the same symptoms that are associated with him, where all of a sudden he died, had her very concerned. What should we learn about the sudden death of Carl Bush?
Well, we should learn that there's a great deal of variation, Armstrong, in the way patients respond to these common adversaries. It is the case that in a handful of patients, and you've seen this about in the press, that what appears to be a rather ham and cheese viral infection can progress rapidly. And the usual cause of death, as you say, respiratory. Think back, for example, 100 years ago to the 1918 pandemic, where young men were in particular ravaged, well over 1 million of them with the reduced population of 1918, and they all died a respiratory death. So it is the case that for some people, this virus, which can proliferate rapidly in the airways and in the alveoli, can overcome the immune system. And we should all be just a little bit chastened by the extent to which another virus, the COVID, really impacted the world's health. So these viruses are becoming occasionally much more lethal than you would otherwise have anticipated.
You know, my senior producer here, Aideen, called me earlier this week, devastated because a very dear friend of ours, Jerry, all of a sudden dropped dead. He was healthy, been exercising, in his early 70s. I think he was 71. I don't know if she ever said it was a heart attack, but whatever it was. But I've heard other stories like Aideen's of people who are just perfectly healthy, just dropping dead.
Well, that is not as uncommon, Armstrong, as you might anticipate. So Aideen's friend had out of hospital sudden cardiac death. There are 350,000 Americans a year in that group. So vascular disease is different than what you and I have been talking about here. This is something which oftentimes erupts with no prior warning. Aideen's friend felt well on Monday and was deceased on Tuesday, that kind of thing. And so that's a very, very important issue for us. And it's interesting to think that in my area of domain, in terms of cardiovascular disease, if I may say so, in my generation, in our generation of physicians and scientists, we have made enormous advances in all fields of vascular disease except that. And so the story of Aideen's friend is a common story, and because they were not under anyone's care. And here's the surprise for your viewers and listeners. It turns out that about 60 to 70% of people who have sudden cardiac death have a rather mild plaque narrowing that caused the problem. So the numbers on this from our experience in the cath lab and other leading centers is that when people have sudden cardiac death, about 70% of those patients, Armstrong, have a 50% or less narrowing. So if they got a stress test, they would have done fine. If you asked them how they felt, they would have been without symptoms. So it's that old biblical adage about beware of danger seen and unseen. And that's why prevention, looking at these arteries early now, is so much the forward-looking key.
You know, Aaron, you know Aaron very well. He books the show. He sent me an article last week, over the weekend, and it's the truth behind fasting. And so I engaged him. I asked him, what did you learn from the article? And this is what he said. Fasting provides longevity and can pretty much cure any disease in 14 to 21 days. Is that factual?
Well, Aaron, of course, has taken fasting to a high art form, God bless him. What's true about fasting, that is what can be said in a rigorous fashion, is the following. Fasting appears to have real benefits. Fasting, you'll remember, is throughout the Old and the New Testament. And it is a spiritual technique, which is now being recognized, Armstrong, as a biological technique. Here's the interesting thing about that. Turns out that fasting hits certain survival instincts deep in the furrows of the body. And so it inaugurates a response in the body, which is a global response within the body to a hypocaloric circumstance. And that response, which has to do with upregulation of a family of genes called the sirtuin genes, is of enormous biological value. So the short answer to the question is there is very deep and profound biological benefits to intermittent fasting. I'm not sure we can say that it can cure any disease in 14 to 21 days from Aaron's lips to God's ear, but it is a valuable thing, and it's been in general underreported. And in my own practice, I have engaged many patients in fasts. Fasts can be undertaken safely and even for prolonged domains in a supervised setting.
Well, in all fairness to him, he was sharing an article that he read. I was just fascinated by it. You know, how close are we, Dr. Donohue, to future where cancer is routinely detected through a simple blood test before symptoms ever appear?
So this is the question. So there is a new test that is available to all of your viewers, simply needs a physician's prescription. And I have looked at this data carefully and gotten the test myself. And here's the concept. Cancers make abnormal proteins. The turn of phrase is paraneoplastic, around and related to the neoplasm. That comes from the Greek. It means new growth. So it's kind of like there is smoke in the factory when the factory is working. And so detecting the smoke in the body has been a very promising way of identifying cancer early on. Armstrong, you and I and all of our viewers can name 4 or 5 people that we know who presented with a lethal cancer in its late stages. So how did it come to be that we somehow skipped stage 1 and stage 2 and parachuted directly into stage 3 or stage 4? So this whole idea of looking for early, if you will, cancer signals is now way out of the box and doing well. There is a study that looked at 22,000 patients who were well. Could be either one of us today, Armstrong. You or me would be candidates. And they had their blood drawn and they were followed. Turned out that a negative cancer signal got you a predictive value of not having a malignancy over the upcoming year of 96%.
That's huge.
It's huge.
Whoa. So I want you, I know we're about to wrap you, and I appreciate this conversation so much because we're using real life experiences that relate to so many people that watches this show. Tell people the dangers of cannabis and marijuana, even though this administration has lowered the bar and everybody seems to, you walk everywhere. I saw this kid, we were on our way to the studio this week, and this father was pushing his little baby in a cart and smoking a butt at the same time. And I said, my God, how irresponsible.
And you're being kind in saying that it's irresponsible. So I am not an advocate of marijuana in any stripe, flavor, or expression. And the data on this keeps pouring out. And I appreciate you raising that issue, as so few in the media do. So there was data presented in the American College of Cardiology meetings in March of 2025 that pointed out the incredible increase in the risk of vascular disease, much like your show manager's friends apparently incurred, in young people smoking marijuana. The cognitive issues are profound. So in particular, adolescents with the forming brain, smoking marijuana is a bit of a one-way ticket to hell. It has to be said out loud. The issue of malignancy, likewise, is tremendously relevant among these patients. So you've noticed, Armstrong, and you've covered it, as to how the point of view on alcohol is slowly changing. Here the idea is marijuana is having its moment in the sun. Oh, it's good for your anxiety. It helps your joint pain. It's a toxin. It should be avoided in all stripes and flavors. And remember what Peter said, that we should be serious and be sober. And so we're neither one when we smoke or ingest marijuana.
And thank you for your honesty. You have not told me anything that I don't already know, and they know it too. All they have to do is search their souls.
Right.
Dr. Donohue, thank you. When we come back, American musician and singer and songwriter Andy Ross will be joining us on this edition of the Armstrong Williams Show. We'll be back. Andy Ross is a rebel with a cause.
How you doing, my friend? Good to see you.
My man? I will tell you, you're on the right platform today.
Let's go.
Let's go. So let me challenge you a minute. Where does the inspiration for you, your creativity come from? Let's say discipline, inspiration, or something deeper. Where does it come from? And when did you know you had it?
Well, I've always been kind of a creative person, and I remember as a kid, like all other kids kind of wanted to come over and play and stuff, and I just kind of wanted to grab my own toys and my own crayon and kind of, color out of the box and do my own thing. But, I had that TV show for 10 years, Maximum Archery World Tour, and I started doing music on the show, and music's probably, without a doubt, my number one outlet for creativity and getting to, be creative on a daily basis. And we had this song called American Rebel in 2015, went viral as a patriotic anthem, and that's where we got the inspiration for the company. So, music is a great outlet and a great way to express yourself.
How do you separate yourself from being that which creates versus that is the creator that gives you the inspiration?
Well, first of all, I'm very blessed. Let me start there. I'm very blessed. I'm very thankful for the way my mind works and the creativity that I have and the opportunity to create. When you have a business like American Rebel, a lot of times you need to have your business hat on kind of 24/7. But we've got some great people here at the company. President Corey Lambert, he gives me the opportunity to continue to, he holds down the fort and kind of runs the business of the business and lets me be out front, being creative and promoting the brand and being a good representation of the brand out there.
So, Andy Ross, as America approaches 250 years, man, we're babies. Do you believe Americans today truly understand the freedoms they inherited, or have we started taking them for granted?
Well, first of all, let's start with the fact we're babies. We're 250 and we're celebrating 250, but we're a very young country. And what I'm in hopes of is that the younger generations will speak and talk to the older generations, and just the stories about what we went through to be a free country. Building railroads across this country, learning to farm, the Industrial Revolution. We lead the world in tech. Accomplishment after accomplishment after accomplishment. Businesses that started in garages that are multi-billion-dollar industries today. That's America, and it should never be taken for granted. And I just hope people sit down and have those conversations. I used to say, I wish every child. Now I say I wish every person had a globe beside their bed. Every morning when you wake up, spin that globe, take your finger and stop that globe. And if your finger lands on the United States of America, you are very fortunate, very blessed, and lucky, because just try to do what you're doing today and have your finger land on somewhere else.
The Second Amendment, a man, has been debated almost since the nation's founding. Why does Andy Ross believe it remains just as important today as when it was written?
Well, it's just as important today as when it was written, and the evidence is just on, is right there in front of you. I believe the Second Amendment defends all the other amendments, but if you just look at countries that have broke out into war where the citizens weren't armed, and they're scrambling trying to figure out how to arm the citizens so they can protect themselves. Just look at here in our own country. Look at the states and the metropolitan areas and the suburbs and rural areas that have the strictest gun control. Those are the highest crime areas in our country. I have a place downtown Nashville and kind of a high rise, and if I walk down the street just a block or two, there's a bank on the corner, and that bank has an armed guard there, and I get that. There's a lot of money in that bank. Right next door, 2 doors down, is a jewelry store. They have an armed guard. There's a lot of diamonds, a lot of jewelry in that jewelry store. I get it. But you know what? I've got possessions of my own too. I have a place out in the country. I have tractors and I have things that are valuable to me, things given to me from my grandfather and handed down. I have a family and children. I have things that are just as valuable to me, and I don't want to have to hire an armed guard. I can protect myself. I have the right to bear arms. I can protect my property, my family, a room full of total strangers, or my country if asked to. And that's the way the Second Amendment, was written. and I believe it's just as powerful and strong and needed today more than ever.
You know, and it's fascinating. You can turn on YouTube and internet, and all of these sudden these songs appear, and you can tell it's AI generated, but it sounds good. I must admit, artificial intelligence is beginning to create music. Do you see AI as a tool, a threat, or both?
I think, you know, in my generation, I think it's going to be like a lot of technology's always been over the 250 years. My generation, at my age, I find it to be a little bit of a threat as it relates to music, because we've worked really hard to hone in on our craft, and we didn't have those tools. And you're right. I mean, you can just put in a couple words or an idea, and the thing will spit out a pretty darn good song. Now, if I was young and starting today and starting as a songwriter, and that was a tool that I had in my tool belt and I grew up with it, I would probably look at it completely different. You can't stand in the way of technology. It's not, I don't like hearing the AI generated songs. I feel like people are taking really shortcuts and not really learning their craft. But, it's technology, and you can't stop it, and the younger generation's going to use it, and they should use what's available to them, so I'm not mad at them. I had a TV show for 10 years called Maximum Archery World Tour, bow hunted the world on outdoor TV, and the real archers grew up with the long bows, the stick bows, and the recurves. And when my generation came along, we were shooting the compound bows, and it was always like, well, yeah, you're breaking all the records out there, but you're using a compound bow. You're not really using a stick and a string. And of course, the new generation now, they're shooting crossbows, and the compound guys are like, hey, that's not really a bow. That's like shooting an arrow through a gun. You can't stop technology, and I think every generation kind of feels about it different.
That's a very good point. I think this is music actually often reflects the mood of a nation. What do you think today's music tells us about our beloved America?
Well, one thing I know for a fact it tells you is freedom of speech, because it's all over the map. And
yes.
I'm thankful that if I can write about what I want to write about, and if the next artist writes about something that just doesn't set that well with me, I just tell myself, and well, remember, they also have freedom of speech. So, from that standpoint, I have a tattoo on this arm that says "Rockin' the First Amendment," because I can write music, and I can write about what I want to write about, and subject matters that I want to write about, and I can write about faith. I can write about hunting. I can write about the 250th anniversary of our great country.
How do you help people navigate and understand the difficult times that we're in now and the uncertainty through your music?
When it comes to music, we try to, I've got a new song out celebrating the 250th anniversary, and it talks about the struggles and the hard times that we went through to be this great country and the challenges. I always believe that one of many things this country does better than any other country is it provides opportunity. But that opportunity is mixed with difficulty. It's opportunity mixed with difficulty. You don't get it right the first time or the second time or the third time always, and it is challenging, and you need to work 3 times harder than you ever dreamed. But that opportunity is there, and if you don't succeed, this country's very forgiving. You can try again. So we try to get that across in music. Then we try to write songs that make people feel good about themselves, that express themselves, that feel good about our country and put our country in a positive light.
It's such a pleasure having you join us today. Where can we hear your new music?
My new song's out, Hold My Beer, on all digital outlets. You can go to andyross.com. Everything American Rebel, our new beer line's out. It's at AmericanRebelBeer.com, and then all things American Rebel at AmericanRebel.com.
What do you think, more than anything else, has the biggest influence and shaped the success that you enjoy today? Because obviously, you are the American dream.
Wow. Without question, I am a man of faith. I'm very thankful, very blessed. I thank the good Lord every day. I believe that being thankful for what you have is a great place to start. I try as much as possible to stay humble, as as I should. I also, outside of God and the Bible, I give a lot of credit to a book by Napoleon Hill called Think and Grow Rich that kind of turned my way of thinking around at a young age, and appreciate having that. My father was very entrepreneurial and taught me a lot growing up. So again, landed in the right country, spun the globe, hit it with my finger and woke up in the right place. And blessed.
Let me poke the bear. You just said something. What advice would Andy Ross give to his young self?
Advice to my young self.
Yes.
I think a lot of people would feel this way. If I could have learned what was important in life a little earlier, would have been good. If I could have learned how trying to live a little beneath your means and how money can compound in your life, especially if you start young, which I did not. I would strongly recommend that children learn that. I wish they would teach it in school. And stay humble. Small little disciplines add up. I'm sure you've heard this said many a times, but make your bed when you wake up in the morning, because it's one thing on your list, and you can get up and 2 minutes after you wake up, you've got one accomplishment, one thing to check off your list, and you're on a roll, right? You're already on a roll. Made bed, check, done. Be disciplined. Every weekend don't have to be a party. Put your faith in God and be thankful.
Andy Ross. So here's the moment. When Andy Ross's career is over and people look back on Andy Ross's work, what do you hope that they say mattered most? Not about your music, Mr. Ross, but about your impact on people's lives.
I hope they would look back and say, here's a guy that's not afraid to get up and swing. He struck out, he wasn't afraid to strike out, which he did in his life, and everyone does, but he was, a guy that would get back up to the plate and take another swing and go for it. And, did his best to be a good person, love thy neighbor. I'd love to be known for loving thy neighbor. I think that and maybe 9 more suggestions would be good to have someone remember you by.
I'm gonna close with this. One of the things that I found in life, and you experience the same thing because we're human. We all have 1,000 thoughts, right? Competing for our attention each day. You can relate. How do you navigate your own thoughts, separate what truly matters from what is merely noise, okay, and maintain clarity in a world filled with constant distractions?
Yeah, that's kind of the $1 million question right there. If we had the perfect answer for that one, I'm sure everybody's lives would look a lot different. It is easy to get distracted, and there's so much out there trying to distract you. That's for sure. There's no shortage of things chirping in your ear to get you distracted. I try to have a list of things to accomplish. I try to stick to that list. I'm not fanatical where I've got 5 pages of notes each day, but I got a half a page of things that I want to get done that I stay focused on. I read in a book somewhere, I apologize, I can't remember the author, but it always said, make sure you do something every day you don't want to do. When you're tired, it's the end of the day and you think that can wait till tomorrow, just do it. I find that a lot with practicing, just say a guitar or piano, you're just too tired, you don't want to do it, but you find if you just make yourself start for 10 minutes, the next thing you know, an hour's gone by and you've really, moved your skill set along.
I can tell you're really thinking deeply about the question. And do you believe our greatest battles are often not with the world around us, Anthony, but with the thoughts we allow to occupy our minds?
I 1,000%. And if you again to keep going back biblical here, but it says to hand over those anxieties and worries, to God and get them off your plate. That you can't have joy, you can't have progress, and I think we all know. I don't know the statistic number here, but 90, 95, 98% of the things that we get upset and worry about, never come to the table anyway. So you spend a lot of time focused on things that really is just wasted energy and wasted time. And if you could learn to hand those things off and just focus in the moment, I think everybody would have a much better day. But that being said, I struggle with it. I fight it every day. I'm certainly not perfect with it. I ask myself quite often at the end of a day or a week or a month or a year why I didn't handle that better and pass those burdens along and hand those anxieties and those worries and complaints off. But I'm working on it like everyone else every day.
But I think you indicated something when you talked about your faith, that you're an unapologetic believer in God and His Son Jesus Christ, that moral clarity helps you, that you have decided what you're no longer going to give permission to. You're no longer going to allow yourself to allow your thoughts to become your identity, to allow yourself to become fearful and turn that over to a greater power that you said has gotten you to where you are today.
Yeah. From an earlier question you asked me, that's just one more thing I wish I could have told my younger self to figure out at a younger age.
And what is that?
To live in the moment, give your worries to God. Make sure when you put your head on the pillow every night, your mind is free. You're ready for sleep. You've handed off your worries, and wake up the next day and be thankful for the day the Lord has given.
And how much better do you think America would be if we return to God?
I mean, every family, every household, every child growing up, the township, the city, the country, the world would all be much better if we turned to God.
And
No
finally,
doubt about
your final thoughts as we wrap this conversation up. If you were to give advice to both political parties and what they could do together to ease the divide, heal the angst between both, and rise to make America still that shining city on the hill that Ronald Reagan once spoke about, what advice would you give, a unifying message would you give both?
Well, start with get over yourself. That might be a good place to start. And you mentioned Ronald Reagan. One piece of advice you could give from Ronald Reagan that he would always, bring to the table. He's like, look, if I can go into a meeting with the other party and I could come out of that meeting with 70-80% of what I wanted, I consider that successful, and I'll sign off on that. The parties today, they think they have to have 100% of everything they go in for. There's no negotiation, there's no give and take. And, I think Ronald Reagan's idea of, compromising, maybe not down to 50-50, but compromising down to 70-30, 80-20, let's listen to what the other side has to say, and let's take into consideration some of their concerns. But, it seems like there's no compromise on either side. So I guess the piece of advice would be, learn to compromise a little bit and learn to listen a little better.
And as a father, do you think America has seen its best days, or does it lie in the generation of children that you're raising for tomorrow as leaders and stewards of this planet?
Yeah, well, it feels like we've seen our best days, but every parent, I think, felt that way. I think every adult feels like, man, it was just a little bit better, simpler times. when I was a little younger. And then, that child grows up and becomes a parent and a grandparent and probably, feels the same way. I think we're all kind of attached to our growing up and our youth and a lot of the, the new ways the world works. Again, technology and those things as you get older. The kids got their minds wrapped around all that stuff at 11, 12, 13, 14 years old. And some of us are still trying to figure it out. But I'm really thankful for the era that I grew up in. I have all the optimism in the world for this, as you said, young 250-year-old country. One of the challenges in my song is I wanted to capture all the things we'd been through and the fights and the struggles, but I also wanted to show optimism for the future that you haven't seen the best yet. The best is yet to come, and this country will thrive. I believe it will, and I believe it's going to be better than ever. And it may not reflect my childhood, but it's never going to do that for any generation. It's always going to move forward. Technology, you can't stop it, and but I'm hopeful.
I always believed, Andy, that the South, I grew up in South Carolina, and that we are the moral compass for the world. The sacrifices that we make for our men and women on the battlefield that have served this country, and what we do and how we stand. And so it's so good to see a country boy and the son of the South join us on our platform today. And I love that you had to dig deep. You dug real deep, brother. And you did a very good job. Let me tell you, I'm just so touched and moved about what's really going on in your soul and what shapes you and what you're passing on to your generation. I mean, you're a fine American. Thank you so much for joining us, my man.
Thank you. Blessed to be here. Thank you for having me.
And when we come back, A. Scott Bolden is going to talk about the upcoming mayoral race in Washington, D.C. and what's at stake. I'm Armstrong Williams. We're just getting warmed up here in this house. We'll be back. And welcome back to the Armstrong Williams Show. I'm so honored to have the former chair of the D.C. Democratic Party and my good friend, A. Scott Bolden, join us to put in perspective of what is truly at stake in this mayoral primary for the future of Washington, D.C. Attorney Bolden, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Armstrong.
Is the Democratic Party in our nation's capital increasingly divided between socialism and centrists?
Well, I don't think the Democratic Party in D.C. is divided. You have two candidates who are vying to be the next D.C. mayor. One is an avowed Democratic socialist, and the other one is a true Democrat, a business Democrat, but a not so liberal Democrat, if you will. And so I think I would describe Kenyon McDuffie as fiscally conservative and socially responsible.
So what is the danger of this, someone being an unapologetic socialist, and what could it mean for the future of Washington, D.C.? And I'm talking about candidate Janice Lewis.
Yeah, Democratic socialism, the far left, has its place. Certainly the mayor of New York is a Democratic socialist, AOC and Bernie Sanders, and they certainly have their following. The D.C. Chamber PAC, the Independent Expenditure PAC, just endorsed Kenyon McDuffie because we believe Kenyon is just a much better candidate, if you will. He's been on the council 12 or 13 years. He's got a proven track record in regard to legislation for sure. He stands for, additional funding for minority businesses, more housing, less taxes. He's been attacked about energy costs, but he's got a record of protecting energy costs for various residents, and is really an innovator, wants to invest in AI and other technology innovations that are going to move the District of Columbia forward. But politically, it just makes sense that Kenyon McDuffie be the next mayor because who's in the White House, Donald Trump, and someone who's got the experience and someone who is not afraid to fight Donald Trump, but reach some common ground. Our far left friends seem not to be seem to be less interested in reaching common ground. And here in the District of Columbia, you've got to reach some common ground with who's in the White House or the House or the Senate, which are all Republicans now. 90% of D.C. are Democrats. You've got to be able to work with and reach compromise and fight at the same time, because we are not a state. We are taxed without representation, and the House and the Senate and the White House could simply pull what we call self-rule here. That is, we are a federal enclave, and we have some independent powers, but not all, notwithstanding how much we pay in taxes federal and locally. And so you've got to have the strong hand of leadership, reasonable leadership, and someone who is willing to work through to save the District of Columbia, because while we want statehood, don't get me wrong, we also don't want to go back because we don't control the House, the Senate, or the White House. Very important fact. Very important fact. And we don't need anybody to learn it on the job, or someone who's been in the council 3 or 4 years that doesn't have a very strong legislative record like Kenya McDuffie.
What is Ms. Lewis's background? What has shaped her?
I don't know Janice as well as others, but I will say this. She's a proud Howard Law graduate. I'm a Howard Law graduate. She certainly was raised in Upper Northwest and certainly is a student of democratic socialism, right? And so and she has owned that, if you will. That's not a bad word as far as I'm concerned. I'm a Democrat. We have a big tent. But for here and now, in the District of Columbia, Armstrong, for the first time, we're going to elect a D.C. delegate to Congress, non-voting member, that's not Eleanor Holmes Norton. There's an open race for the mayor's race, if you will. You could have at least 3 or 4 or 5 new council members, if you will. That's a transformative political landscape where you're going to have all new leadership, or the majority of positions new leadership, as opposed to some people who have been there, people who have done it and done the negotiating and the legislating, and really have been stewards of not just politics, but the government and all that is good about the D.C. government in working with our federal agencies and partnerships, as well as with the elected offices, the federal elected offices. It's a very unique city, very unique. It's a federal enclave, and while we certainly deserve our voting rights, I'm not sure D.C., let alone the United States, when they look at their nation's capital, that they want a democratic socialist. We got to do better than that, because this is not the time.
So, Scott, what is it about, tell us more about Mr. McDuffie and why you think that he is exactly what the city needs as Mayor Muriel Bowser takes her last bow, considering the fact that you place emphasis that Trump is in the White House and you've got to work out some kind of amicable relationship. You got to work with him. You just cannot ignore him.
No doubt about it. And with our self-determination at risk, the White House and the House and Senate, controlled by Republicans, could just, with one swipe of the pen, could certainly reduce our self-determination and our ability to even get funding from the federal government, or for the feds to do a lot of the day-to-day or a lot of the daily operations of the government are run by the feds, could cut funding, if you will, and could strike down legislation passed by the council and signed by the mayor. I think Mayor Bowser did an outstanding job of reaching that balance.
Let me take a quick break and come back more with Scott Bolden when we return. What is at stake in D.C.'s upcoming election? Scott, how do you make the case to voters about what happens if the city becomes unfriendly to businesses? You see what's happening in New York City. You see how the mayor of Seattle, Washington is backtracking now with Starbucks apologizing. How do you make voters, you educate them to really understand what's at stake and that this leadership in this election matters?
Yeah, the business community is not a bad word, or having a business community support. they're 1,000% behind Kenyon McDuffie because of his not only his experience, but his legislative record and his balanced view on moving the city forward. The economic growth agenda is what the Chamber of Commerce PAC calls it. It's a growth agenda that not only benefits small businesses, major corporations, but also a workforce that is prepared for the 21st and 22nd century, where we are a qualified workforce. We have a trained workforce, if you will, and a workforce that is qualified to do work on major public projects, not just the agreements between the unions for the sake of hiring union workers, but for a workforce that may or may not be unions, if you will, but at the same time, they're qualified union workers, and they live in the district, they work in the district, and they've got the district's best interests at heart. This is not just a business agenda when we talk about Kenyon McDuffie. When you talk about AI and investments in computer technology and what have you, our young people need to be prepared for that, and so he's big on investing in AI. Housing is a huge issue. He's got a strong housing record, where his opponent talks a good game about a housing record, but he's delivered on housing. A lot more to be done, if you will. And then let's talk about crime, which is a huge issue in the District of Columbia, right? Kenyon McDuffie is a former federal prosecutor. He certainly lives in Ward 5. He grew up in a very challenged community and neighborhood. He remembers the shots and friends being killed and stuff, and he thinks about that and lives that in his political life as he remembers those days. But more importantly, he wants 1,000 more police officers, well trained, if you will, on the street to keep crime down. Working in partnership with the White House and the feds, that's okay. We really don't have much choice. Who doesn't want a safer community? And so access to small businesses, entrepreneurship, including for those returning citizens. You know, returning citizens can't get jobs, and that's maybe why very often we have a recidivism rate that we're not happy with. But if you train them in entrepreneurship, for example, right? If you develop them in workforce development, right, you'll see recidivism go down, but more importantly, you'll give them an alternative to a criminal life, including young people. And so we stand with Kenyon McDuffie for all of those reasonable policies that I just described, right? And if he can implement those, and get the city behind him and be voted in as the next mayor of the District of Columbia, I think the city will be in good stewardship. 2 former mayors have endorsed him. He's the solid choice. He's the person that is going to lead us over the next 4 to 8 years. I think with Janice, she certainly has been elected to the council, but she's not the answer right now, if you will. You got 2 choices, and he's just a better choice. I hope the District of Columbia voters agree with the Chamber PAC and others who are behind Kenyon McDuffie.
What do you think is fueling her rise, where she's doing well?
Oh, I think she's got a lot of young people. She's got a lot of energy with her campaign. She's got a lot of the far left, if you will. She's got a lot of the environmentalists, very popular with the gay Democratic vote, if you will. And her campaign does have energy, if you will. She's younger, and she's got a lot of ideas. But as I say with the far left, you know, Conrad, I'm a moderate business Democrat, so the far left and the far right both hate me, as I say politically. And so, you know, I like ideas. Politics is about ideas, but the politics of governing is about getting it done. And if you can get elected, now you got to deliver on those promises. I'm not convinced that Janice, in this particular case, can only pay for the projects or the ideas that she has, but that's the biggest challenge with the far left, right? The far left has some great ideas. They're socialist ideas, but if you can figure out how to pay for them, tell me about it, I might follow you. Here, most of the time, the far left simply cannot deliver a message that's acceptable to most voters because it seems unrealistic that they can pay for them, or seems unfair to those who are generating revenues and the highest amount of taxes for a jurisdiction. And so I just don't think it's realistic right now.
A. Scott Bolton, it's always a pleasure. You're fair-minded. It's nothing personal. You love this city. You want to see
Yeah.
this city thrive and grow. And you're not saying that she won't be ready in the future, but now may
Yeah.
not be the time. Is
Absolutely.
What you're saying. And
Too
you want
critical.
proven
Too many
leadership.
changes.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Donohue. Thank you, Andy Ross. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And enjoy the weekend French Open Championships live from Paris, France. I'm Armstrong Williams. Thank you for being a part of our house, WGLA 24/7, and the National News Desk. We're out of here, baby. We're out of here.